Climate Lobby Chapter.
Welcome. I'm Catherine De Leon, and I'm on the board of 350 South Florida. Been with 350 South Florida for about 4 years, and previously I was with the Miami Climate Alliance.
I'm Jim Tees. I'm not highly active member of South Florida 350.org. I went to the meeting that we had several months ago before people started quarantining in South Miami.
Oh, yes.
And Brian, are you there?
Yes. Yeah, so I'm Brian Olson, and I'm with the local Quaker meeting, and we're part of the Miami Climate Alliance, and also have been active with the Miami-Dade Democratic Environmental Caucus.
Nicole, you have to unmute Angel so he can say hello.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, Melba. Thank you for joining
Hi.
us.
Sure, it's my pleasure. How's everybody doing this afternoon?
It's fine.
Awesome.
We're doing great. Thanks for joining us again. And this is our candidate forum when we're discussing the topic, the intersection between climate and racial justice. And our host, Eric, will take the mic and we'll start the discussion with Melba. Thank you all for joining. This will be shared live in Facebook and also on YouTube. So Eric, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Do we have a candidate yet?
Yes.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, okay, great. Excellent. Well, welcome, Melba.
Thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to the discussion. Sorry, I'm literally on the road in between working on campaign stuff and getting the word out there. So forgive me, I'm doing this from the car and trying to MacGyver a tripod. This is the glamorous part about campaign life that they don't show you on television. Yes.
Well, please be careful.
Sure.
Okay.
Hang on, we're getting there, sorry.
Great. So, basically, did Nicole, did you go over sort of the brief little agenda?
No.
No? Okay. So, yeah, we want to spend the next sort of hour getting to know Melba Pearson. We'll do like a brief introduction from the candidate, and we'll have some prepared questions, and then a Q&A from whoever from the audience. So if you have questions, please, as things come up, please type them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. Pretty simple. Okay, so yes, 350 South Florida is our local brand, or excuse me, 350 South Florida Action is the political arm of 350 South Florida, which is our local chapter of 350.org. It's a global climate action organization. The 350 refers to the parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that scientists from the IPCC determined would be the safest level of carbon dioxide to avoid catastrophic impacts of climate change. And we're already, at like 420. So we've passed that mark a while ago, and it's really getting to the point where we need to take some significant actions if we're going to, basically avoid the collapse of civilization. And I hate to use that. It sounds hyperbolic, but it really is getting down to that kind of point. Great. So we are going to be having a discussion about what we can do here locally, especially as how the impacts and effects of climate change intersect with racial justice, which is certainly something that has been a big topic in the news lately, but also just something that our country has had a long history of difficulties addressing. And, we can't really deal with the environment and climate change, while we have significant portions of our population that are, in fear for their lives and unable to meet their basic needs, because we're all in this together. We need to be in the same struggle together. So, Melba, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and, who you are, what you're running for, and a little bit about your campaign, that would be great.
Sure. So again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for inviting me and sharing your platform with me. My name is Melba Pearson, and I'm running to be the next state attorney of Miami-Dade County, Florida. A little bit about me. I was a prosecutor here in Miami, the office in which I seek, for close to 16 years. I handled everything from misdemeanors all the way to double homicides, really trying to bring things to closure as they go through the tough experiences that brought them in contact with the criminal justice system. In addition, I served as president of the National Black Prosecutors Association, where I really got the opportunity to learn, especially during the Obama White House, with regards to criminal justice reform and how we could be doing things better here in Miami-Dade County. So after my time as a prosecutor, I decided to join the ACLU of Florida, where I worked there for close to 3 years, working on Amendment 4, which returned voting rights to people with felony convictions, as well as criminal justice reform, immigration rights, and police practices in general. So I left the ACLU at the end of last year, and I'm now a full-time candidate for state attorney. And, again, as you can see, I'm in the car, I'm out and about. I do have my mask, so, always staying safe that way. But again, when you're a grassroots candidate and it's all about, going to where the people are, you have to make some sacrifices, but try to do it in a way that's safe for me and my team and safe for the folks that we're encountering. So just want to make sure that is very centered. So that's about me, and looking forward to chatting about my platform momentarily, or if you guys want to ask me about it, or if you want me to go ahead and just talk about it, let me know.
Yeah, if you want to just briefly introduce it, and we have some, specific questions, but go ahead.
Sure. Okay. So my platform has 4 basic pillars. First is that of bail reform. So I would be ending the use of cash bail for nonviolent offenses, because the bail system creates 2 systems of justice, one for the wealthy and one for the poor. When you look at the cases of Jeffrey Epstein, of Harvey Weinstein, of R. Kelly, so many others, it's very clear that the amount of money you have in your bank account or your pocket does not directly result in you being less of a risk. Just because you have money doesn't mean that you won't still go back to harming our community. So I really want the focus to be about risk, not about wealth, which is why I'm going to end the use of cash bail for nonviolent offenses in conjunction with programming to make sure that people are addressing the underlying issues that got them into the system to begin with. The next part of my platform is that of juvenile justice. So in Florida, we have a system that's called direct file, where we take kids out of the juvenile system and place them into the adult system to face accountability. That's problematic for a number of reasons. First off, science is clear. And, I know that, 350 is really all about climate change and the environment. We know that climate change is real. We know that science is real. We know that the Rona is real, right? We know all of these things. So we've learned from countless doctors who have studied the human brain that the human brain does not fully develop until the age of 25. So it makes absolutely no sense. It flies in the face of common sense. It flies in the face of science to hold children accountable by adult standards. So I am going to end the practice of direct file, with the exception of when it is mandated by law. And it's mandated by law usually, like if you have a school shooting type situation where you have a young person who brought a gun to school and shot a bunch of people, or you have a young person who committed an armed robbery and somebody was harmed. That's the type of situation where by law you have to send it to adult court. But everything else can stay in the juvenile system. So that's what I intend to do. The third part of my platform has to do with holding corrupt elected officials and bad police officers who harm our community accountable. I'll be creating a civil rights unit that will have dedicated prosecutors who will solely work on the issues of policing to make sure that these cases are resolved within 6 months to a year, as opposed to 5 years like is happening now. And also, my opponent has never charged a police officer for an on-duty killing in the 27 years she's been in office. Not one. So again, it's all about being aggressive about these cases and taking them seriously. So that's some of the work that my civil rights unit will be doing. And also being more aggressive when it comes to public corruption, because again, it doesn't make any sense to me to be going after the low-hanging fruit. The bus driver that used the county gas pump to fill up his personal car with gas, and then arresting him and calling that a win for public corruption. That's not the public corruption that we know that exists in Miami-Dade County. I'm thinking about the developers who are giving hundreds of thousands of dollars in kickbacks to commissioners and elected officials so that they can gentrify our communities. I mean, that's what I'm thinking about when we talk about public corruption. So that's where I want the focus to be. And then the last aspect is that of transparency. So the ACLU did a study that showed that there are clear, stark racial inequalities here in Miami-Dade County, to the tune of Black Miamians getting almost 3 times worse outcomes than their white counterparts at every stage of the criminal justice system. And that Black Hispanic Miamians have almost up to 6 times worse outcomes than white Miamians. So this isn't justice. This isn't acceptable. The way I want to go about handling this is doing my own data research and then implementing policies that we know can start to reduce these inequalities and make sure that justice is real and accessible for everybody in this county. So that's the basics of my platform, and I really look forward to answering any questions that folks may have.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the introduction there. Sounds like a great platform. So yeah, obviously, as you mentioned, we have a lot of stuff happening at the same time right now with the COVID crisis, the sort of pandemic of police brutality, the economic collapse that's imminent, and then of course, a looming climate crisis. So how do you see these issues kind of relate to each other? And what do you think that you can do in your role as state attorney to help address them?
Yeah, so I think there are a number of things. Number one, when we start to really explore these issues of wealth and how that intersects and creates, untenable situations for people, as in having situations where you don't have, proper housing, where you don't have access to, you're in a food desert, right? Because they're not bringing in fresh food and not fresh food, but just, reliance more on canned goods as opposed to like having a Trader Joe's or a Whole Foods or something where you can get fresh produce. All of these things factor into the criminal justice system, because if people are not stable at home, this causes them to end up being in the criminal justice system, either out of need or, you look at the people who are unhoused and how they end up constantly interacting with the criminal justice system. So for me, it's about, number one, pushing that reliance on science. right? Because I don't understand how we as a country got away from the concept of believing experts, right? Believing people who went to school for 4, 8, 15 years to study a particular topic and be able to give us accurate information. And we just are like, no, we don't like what you have to say, so we're just not going to, you know, follow any of these recommendations. So I intend to use my platform as a state attorney to really focus on the use of facts, the use of data, and the use of science. Because I think the more elected officials that use their platform and say, listen, we're going to rely on the facts and not just a feeling, not just, you know, making up talking points, even though it has no relevance or it doesn't help the people that you serve. We need more elected officials who are willing to stand up and use facts to back themselves up, kind of go back to the way things used to be when it came to, you know, you didn't just spew anything when you got on the podium. You actually had to be prepared and, you know, come with concrete information and solutions. So yeah, those are my thoughts on how these things intersect, you know, really just bring it back to facts and science.
Yeah, definitely. Excellent. So I see we do have a hand raised for Jeff, but do you want to? Can we wait until the end to ask a question? All right, great. So in response to the COVID crisis, a broad coalition of community groups and nonprofits, including 350.org, have called for a just recovery, which basically includes like these 5 principles in terms of any kind of COVID relief package that might be coming out of Congress or local governments, which is number 1, prioritizing health of the community, providing economic relief directly to the people, through a variety of means, through unemployment, food aid, direct payments, putting people over profits, and making sure that businesses accepting federal aid, have to meet minimum, standards of decency for how they treat their workers. Investing in a regenerative economy, preventing a future climate crisis by not providing bailout money to fossil fuel companies, and using those trillions of dollars that have now been allocated to rebuild our physical and natural infrastructure, and then protecting democracy by expanding vote by mail and online voter registration, and of course protecting the post office and the census. So. First of all, I mean, do you agree with all these principles? And second of all, since a lot of these are kind of national, federal issues, how would you see your role as a state attorney to help bring some of that just recovery to Miami-Dade?
Yeah, so I support each and every one of those positions that you just listed, because again, when you look at issues of wealth and inequality, the fact that certain people like Ruth's Chris and all these bigger companies were able to get millions of dollars in aid, and small businesses, especially small minority-owned businesses, got left out in the cold. And then, they're going to end up closing, and all of these things end up intersecting, because if people aren't able to pay their bills, all of these businesses that fail, these are employees who now don't have jobs. And, if you have a situation where some of these businesses hired returning citizens, people with felony convictions, and now the business goes out of business, how are those folks going to be able to find a job? Because it's already difficult generally to find a job. And then now with a felony conviction, it's that much harder. So I support all of these things. I would be using my platform as the state attorney with the largest office in the state of Florida and the 4th largest in the country to continue to raise awareness around this. It would be giving me a really amplified voice and, basically like a megaphone to be able to fight for these issues. So I will stand in coalition with folks who are fighting for these changes to bring awareness and bring as much might as I can to make sure that people have the services they need to be able to rebuild and move forward.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. So as far as, environmental racism, obviously we know that Black and brown communities are usually most negatively affected by the impacts of pollution and unequal distribution of resources when it comes to infrastructure development. So, we have with situations where certain neighborhoods are flooding more than others. Certain neighborhoods are having difficult issues with their water quality because when flooding happens, the aging septic systems get overwhelmed, and we have people that need to boil water just because of a heavy rain event. In addition, we've got climate gentrification where higher land areas which were typically inland and of less value, which is where a lot of minority communities were relegated to, as our South Florida was developing, are now more valuable because of the potential of sea level rise. So, what kind of, have you seen any kind of cases come through the state attorney's office that would address any climate gentrification or infrastructure development? How would you see, again, your role in trying to even the playing field here?
Yeah, so I mean, when I think about the issues that are brought about by climate change and gentrification, I think about also like illegal dumping and sort of like how all of these different construction sites may end up dumping their waste in an empty field that happens to be in an under-resourced neighborhood. And again, it's not the type of situation where you're not going to go to Coral Gables and dump your stuff, right? Because that the police are going to be called immediately and code enforcement's going to come and it's going to be cleaned up and gone within 2 seconds, and somebody's getting fined. As opposed to in urban, communities, folks end up driving by the same spot for weeks at a time and still see piles of debris, So making sure that people who are using our communities as dumping grounds are being held accountable, are being fined, and then that money doesn't just go to the state. That money should go back to the community to help beautify, the area, to help, make, create a park for the kids or something along those lines. Leave something of benefit within the community, as opposed to, you got fined $10,000 for illegal dumping, and now that money goes to the state of Florida and the community sees absolutely no benefit. So that's probably one of the most direct connections I think my office has when it comes to environmental issues. However, I would welcome prosecuting cases much like we looked at the situation in Flint. And if there are bad actors who know that certain issues have been happening in our community, have enabled these issues to happen in our community, and it results in illness and birth defects and death, that's certainly a case that I would be pursuing very aggressively to make sure that the families get closure and that changes are made so that, more people don't get sick or injured. I know we had a bit of a similar situation with the algae blooms up in Palm Beach or so, that certain, Black communities basically, when it came to the waterways there was not the same type of signage warning that the algae were in bloom, as opposed to the wealthier beach and waterfront areas where there was signage all over the place. So that's the types of things I'm thinking about when it comes to using my office to address climate issues.
Mm-hmm. Since a lot of the environmental issues in general, and especially with climate change, are sort of long-term, the impacts are seen much later than the actions. It doesn't seem to mesh very well with our criminal justice system in terms of holding individuals or corporations accountable. Do you have any thoughts on the limitations, as far as how we can actually hold certain bad actors accountable when the impacts are diffuse and on a time scale that's often decades?
Yeah, so I think of it this way. So what's coming to light now may have started 20 years ago, but at least we're still able to hold them accountable for actions done 20 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Like the statute of limitations, we have to work around that. But if we have a situation where the harm was only discovered after a certain amount of time, then, we have an argument to be able to file cases. So I think at the end of the day, it's just about, first of all, having the will, because if you don't have the political will, you're not getting anything done, right? But also, I think it's about being creative and looking at the particular set of facts and trying to see how we can best use the law to help the community. you know, and sometimes it's very easy and straightforward, and sometimes it's not, and you have to, you know, think outside of the box to figure out a way to achieve justice. But, you know, that's what prosecutors do, and you got to be up for the job, you know.
Definitely. Well, on that note, you know, some cities and localities are starting to take legal action against fossil fuel companies, you know, like ExxonMobil, and it's been, you know, there's been a suit filed against them by New York, you know, because of exactly, you know, their knowledge of the climate crisis and their inability and unwillingness to do anything about it. Given that Miami is, you know, literally a ground zero for the impacts of climate change, we would definitely seem to be, you know, I don't know what the legal term is, but like the aggrieved party, you know, is certainly having the impacts. Would you support a kind of a lawsuit, you know, like that against fossil fuel companies, similar to, you know, the tobacco lawsuits that we're still seeing working their way through the courts?
Yeah, I would support that. However, just to be clear, that the situation you're speaking of would be a civil type suit, not handled within the criminal system. So that would be something that would be spearheaded, like, you know, maybe by the Florida Attorney General, as were the tobacco cases back in the day, or it would be done by different law firms that care about these issues, you know, whether it be like Earth Justice in conjunction with, you know, some of the bigger law firms, to be able to push this forward. So I would be happy to lend my support, but it's not something I would have a direct involvement in, because of the fact that it's outside of the criminal justice system.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you for making that clarification.
Sure.
Yes. So let's see. Do you have, yeah, I guess, any additional thoughts on environmental justice, environmental racism?
Yeah.
How the criminal justice system can, you know, intersect with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, part of it for me, I want to work very creatively with the stakeholders around the issue of people experiencing homelessness, because again, I think that's part of it's an environmental issue in some ways, especially when you have, you know, certain encampments and, you know, folks may end up, again, I mean, you're experiencing homelessness, so you're going to, you know, do what you need to do to survive. And that may mean, you know, leaving needles or leaving, you know, human waste or whatever, wherever it is that you're encamped, right? So I see that as an environmental issue from the standpoint of we need to connect the unhoused population with services so that, again, you know, they're not living outside and living in squalor, and also our communities won't be upset by the situation as well. You know, I think there's a balance that can be found, again, to make sure that people have their dignity and are able to live in safety and with health. So that's the one thing that I think about, maybe, again, not the most traditional environmental issue, but it is an environmental issue because of the fact that, you know, there are on the front lines of dealing with what's going on in our community. So, you know, so that's one thought there. But again, I'm willing to be as creative as possible to hold people accountable for harming our communities, whatever form that takes, whether it's affecting our air, our water, our land, or affecting literally directly our personal safety.
So you mentioned that you wanted to create like a special unit for you know, police accountability, you know, crimes, which is certainly wonderful, and we definitely need. You know, given that we do have a lot of environmental crimes happening, you know, mostly related to, you know, illegal dumping or wildlife issues, well, first of all, is there an environmental crimes unit anywhere in South Florida that you know of? And how would, you know, do you think that's something that we should create?
Sure. So I am not aware of any environmental crimes unit per se in Florida. I do know that there was an environmental crimes task force at the state attorney's office when I was there. I don't know how much they did, or I was not very much dialed into what the work that they were doing. What I would want to do is, when I become state attorney, is look and really audit those cases, see how many environmental crimes cases we have on an annual basis, what's the size and scope of the cases. And based on knowing that information, then I can allocate resources accordingly. So what that could look like could be a dedicated environmental crimes prosecutor, which means that's all they do all day, every day, and that's their area of specialty. It could be a unit if it's that many cases. Again, it's about figuring out what the bandwidth is and what's needed to be able to handle these cases effectively. So I'll know a little bit more about that once I'm able to get in and really dig into the numbers firsthand.
Gotcha. All right. So the last question that we had here is probably a pretty simple one. Have you, have you signed or would you be willing to sign the No Fossil Fuel Money candidate pledge, which is at nofossilfuelmoney.org, which basically says that you're not accepting donations from fossil fuel company executives or their PACs and corporations?
Yes, I'd be willing to do that. And I can assure everyone that I have gotten no donations from any large PACs, unions, anything like that. It's all been individual donations by people who really care about accountability and reform across the country. So.
Excellent. Well, you can, actually sign that at nofossilfuelmoney.org. We can send you the link, and then, you can be up there as a environmental champion.
Awesome. Will do.
So yes, and then lastly, I guess as we plan to transition to a renewable energy economy, I guess there are a lot of rules and regulations that are currently preventing people from utilizing say rooftop solar to the best of their ability at home. And that has to deal with, the Public Service Commission and the state of Florida. But is there, again, any kind of legal way, anything that is, preventing people from, as far as from the criminal justice system, from, accessing renewable energy?
I don't see any legal reasons why people don't have access. I think it's more of, FPL and other entities really fighting back against this because of the fact that they're going to see decreased revenue, right? And that solar eventually ends up paying for itself, in pretty short order. So I don't see any criminal barriers to the use of renewable energy. I just see it more as a corporation type situation and profits.
Gotcha. All right, great. Well, that is all that I have. So let's open it up to the floor. I know Jeff had his hand raised, and if anyone else has a question in the chat, I guess Nicole can read them out. So Jeff, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Okay, thank you. I have possibly two questions. The first one is, as you have noticed, we are in the cone for the hurricane, or well, anticipated hurricane. And, ever since the Bahamas got hit by my namesake and flattened, plus being a longtime Florida resident, I kind of anticipate things. And one of the things that I think you might overlap with is if people are left homeless after the hurricane, especially people that live in marginal housing to begin with, and there's an increase in the homeless population. Not to mention that Trump just rescinded an Obama era thing on affordable housing being included in developments. I don't know, your office probably doesn't deal with that, but you might deal with the homeless more often. And what might be some issues that you would be involved in if we reach kind of a homeless pandemic after a serious hurricane?
Yeah, so Okay, so fingers crossed that that doesn't happen. As I'm a daughter of immigrants, my father's from Jamaica and my mother's from Trinidad. So, you know, I grew up watching hurricanes. Even though I was born and raised in New York, we're always watching, you know, the islands to make sure that our family and friends are okay. So, you know, the stress is real, and it's a tough one. And I know the destruction that these hurricanes can cause for entire economies, as seen in Puerto Rico, and again, it's experienced in Jamaica in the past. So this is a very real question. And I think that for me, number one, it's about making sure that I am using my platform to basically shame those who are not really helping the homeless, right? Like they have these mandates, they run these organizations that are supposedly working with the unhoused population, but yet, you know, we're not seeing that decrease that we would expect for the well-funded operations these folks head up. So I've got a lot of questions there. Number two, it's about enforcement and really getting with the police departments and laying out what's acceptable and what's not. I don't think the police should be involved in working with the unhoused. I think that it should be advocates working with them and connecting them with services and getting them, you know, if someone needs mental health or addiction treatment, things like that. But I think the priority has to be with connecting people with services and housing, not arresting them. Because when you arrest them, you put them in jail for a night or two, that still doesn't solve the issue of them being unhoused. So we need to be creative and proactive. And I think the way to do that is to work with the advocates who are truly on the ground fighting for the rights and for the ability for the unhoused people to have their dignity back, right? So I think that's the way to go about it. And, you know, again, just really raise awareness, kind of clamp down on that enforcement piece with the knowledge that jailing people does not end the unhoused problem.
Okay, and part two, like Brian, I'm also involved with the Democratic Environmental Caucus, and I was wondering if, I don't know if Dade County has sent you out a survey or if that's relevant, and how is your campaign going? Are you getting endorsements? How's it looking?
Yeah, so I did have a conversation with someone from the Environmental Caucus. I never did receive a survey. If I did, I would totally filled it out. I am getting endorsements. I've been endorsed by the Labor Community Alliance, Florida National Organization of Women, the Haitian Democratic Caucus, the Hispanic Democratic Caucus, the Black Democratic Caucus, the LGBTQ plus Democratic Caucus, the Blue Wave Coalition, the Collective, you know, and a few others that I can't think of off the top of my head. So the endorsements are definitely coming in. And yeah, I mean, we're out here, 19 days left. People are very excited. I was just in Overtown a little while ago and folks were like, we know who you are. We're voting for you. We're supporting you. And it's still kind of surreal, right?
Nice.
And yeah, so it's been a great experience, and you know, just doing everything we can to bring it home and raise that final awareness in the last few days, and, you know, encouraging people to get their vote by mail ballot and turn it in ASAP. Don't like wait to the end, especially knowing that the polls are going to be, you know, dangerous from the perspective of the Rona still out there. And also, when it comes to election day, I really want people to avoid that confusion of, you know, if polling places decide to close because they're in, let's say, a gated community, and they're like, oh, we don't want a whole bunch of people coming in, and we don't know if they have the Rona or not. You know, there's a lot of confusion that can happen on election day. And I'd hate to see people, you know, standing in long lines or unable to take off from work and then, you know, deciding like, I'm not going to vote because I don't have time. That's why I hope everybody votes by mail, and I'm really raising awareness around that. So that's what our campaign's really aggressively working on now as well.
Thank you. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Great. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, I think we have a great question from Rachel. Do you want to unmute yourself, or should I just read it from the chat? Right there, Rachel. Okay, I'll just read it. It says, we have to mitigate the greenhouse gas emissions at the source, mass divestment from coal, oil, natural gas, the only way. FPL owns this state and refuses to implement solar in Florida. How can we stand up to these companies?
Well, that's definitely a question of activism and advocacy, right? And really raising awareness around these issues and why it's important. Really raising awareness around solar power and how much money that saves people, as well as how it saves the environment. But I think a lot of people really react to the bottom line, because at the end of the day, it's about how it affects their pocketbooks, right? I mean, most people care about the environment, but when you really are able to bring it home, like you're saving the environment and you're saving money, that changes the discussion, right? So then now more people would be demanding and fighting for solar power because they know it's in their best interest. So yeah, so that's the story there, and I think that that's a good idea, and I would support it. But it's not something we can do on the as a prosecutor, right? That's not something that I have a direct hand in. If the county wants to tax these companies differently or something like that, that's your county commission or the mayor's office, and then of course going up as high as the governor as well.
So actually, I had a few. Thank you. Additional thoughts. First of all, there's been legislation passed, I think at the federal level, but also in various states, that targeting environmental activists, especially that are protesting through direct action, like physical blockades of pipeline and fossil fuel projects. First of all, is this constitutional? Because I don't think it would be. And second of all, if something like that were to come up in say, Florida, how would you deal with that? If there is, for example, a state law passed that says, that blocking a infrastructure project is a serious crime, and we have, say, a massive protest here. You are on the one hand obligated to enforce the existing law, but if the existing laws are not just in that sense, how do you deal with that situation?
Sure. So I have the heart of a civil rights attorney and activist anyway. So I always encourage people to exercise their First Amendment right to let their voices be heard and to, fight for the vision that they want to see in their county and in their state and in their country, in our country, right? So, I'm a big proponent of that. And so I'm not going to be prosecuting, protesters, right? Because that just, again, that's undemocratic. Like, you have the right to be able to let your voice be heard. Now, depending, if there's a situation where there's violence and people have been harmed or property has been massively destroyed, that's a different discussion. But if you're just literally, blockading and raising your voice around an issue, I'm not going to prosecute for that. That's crazy. No.
Right. So you would not be turning the National Guard loose on the water protectors like DAPL.
Oh, God, no. Well, the person who has control of the National Guard is the governor.
Governor, right.
All of us, that elections matter. Every single election matters.
For sure. So what, speaking of, protests and whatnot, I know you've been pretty active in the recent demonstrations. How do you feel like, our local system has dealt with a lot of the arrests that have been made, and I'm not sure, if who's being charged with what, or if they're all being dropped or whatnot. But do you feel like generally that protests for civil rights have been respected over the last few months, and what would you do differently, better?
Yeah, I think it's definitely been a mixed bag. I think that from the standpoint of arrests, the arrests are happening like crazy, right? I think in some instances, I think it also depends what city you're in, and sort of like what their thought process is on the protest and where the protests are happening. But arrests are definitely happening. Some prosecutions are happening, not a ton, but again, they're happening. So I definitely want to, again, promote the fact that you have a First Amendment right to let your voice be heard around injustice. And I don't think we should have a situation where the police are cracking down on people being peaceful that are, just advocating for their rights. So, that's where I am with it.
Okay, so I think we have a few more questions in the chat. I think Rachel first wanted to ask one. I think you're unmuted, Rachel, if you wanted to go ahead.
Yes. Hi. Thank you for participating in this candidate forum and answering all of our questions. This has been like really informative, and thank you 350 for hosting this. I wanted to ask, like on the same like topic of like civil unrest and like massive like public gatherings, especially during in the time of Corona, we're seeing like the federal government respond like by sending out, you know, weapons of war and using it against civilians, especially like in Miami-Dade County. Friends of mine have just cans of tear gas from these protests, and like, you know, wounds from rubber bullets and stuff. Not to mention like all the scraped knees and like everything from getting like road burn. It's terrible. So that those protests and a lot of that violence happened with a road blockade. Specifically, and also we have a independent civilian review panel that has we've been trying to reestablish on a Miami-Dade County level, just so that way we could have some oversight for cases of police brutality. But that was vetoed by Mayor Carlos Jimenez recently, and the meeting by the county commissioners to work on it today was canceled. So I'm kind of like at my wit's end, I guess. And I like kind of just started getting involved in politics. I'm 22, so I've only participated in so many elections, but people I know are already, you know, running for office, and I'm very involved. But I guess I'm like at a crossroads every day to figure out, like, I know that like the people are being killed, and like my life is actively being threatened every day, and our situation is literally creating millions of climate refugees, like every day that we stall action on climate change. So the timeline that we're looking at for like greenhouse gases, like reaching a tipping point and I guess turning on like a point of no return, where we will have a 6 mass extinction, is approaching much sooner than we think. So my question, like specifically, is like the climate emergency and like serious action that needs to be done. How can you help move and speak for the people and move justice forward? Because racial justice, climate justice is racial justice. And the police right now are protecting the elites that are upholding the status quo right now. I'm sorry, I know that was like a long question, but that's kind of what I need to respond to, because that's been what's been weighing on my heart for these past couple years, I guess. Thanks.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a great question. So first off, civilian oversight in this go round might be a wrap, but there's an election on August 18th. And that's when we're electing new county commissioners, we're electing a new mayor. So now's the time to do that research. Now's the time to see what the candidates have been saying, where they stand when it comes to issues of climate change, when it comes to issues of police oversight, and ask them and hold their feet to the fire, right? Because once you know where they stand, you can vote accordingly. And then as soon as they all get sworn in and take office, we can bring up the issue again of civilian oversight. We can bring up different climate change protections that we want to see passed, right? So I know like it seems like a defeat right now, but just know like the fight's not over. We have time to get more engaged. And then, you know, when it comes to just the greater movement, voting is important and raising awareness is important, right? You know, once I'm elected, I'll be able to use my platform to fight for some of these issues. But again, you know, the people who have that direct impact on a lot of these issues are your county commission, your mayor, your governor, and your legislatures. And if we're not holding each of those entities accountable, we're not going to see the change that we seek as a community, period, end of story.
Well, thank you for that again. I think we had another question from Jeff.
Hello.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Okay. Am I unmuted?
Yep.
Okay. What are your thoughts about defund the police?
Yeah, so first off, whenever I talk about defund the police, I start with a definition, right? Because I think a lot of people, when they hear defund the police, they think abolish the police, which is a different discussion to be had altogether. When I speak about defund the police, I speak about the issue of allocation of resources, right? Because the one thing I experienced as a prosecutor is that there'll be great programs that are, government programs that, help address addiction within the prison system, or are other options of things that we can refer defendants to be able to address underlying issues going on. And what always happens is whenever there's a shortfall in the budget, those are the first programs to get cut. And every time we end up flush again with cash, that money is never restored. So we keep stripping away from these social service programs that can actually have a positive effect on our community and that have been proven to have a positive effect on our community. We strip the funding away from that and then wonder why we're in the situation we're in, where the unhoused population is not getting the services they need. The people who are suffering with mental health are not being able to be connected with, treatment and services, So for me, it's about looking at our budget and really making sure it reflects what we want as a community. And if we want more mental health services, if we want more addiction programs that will treat that people don't relapse and reoffend, if we want to see the unhoused population being treated with dignity, we have to fight and make sure that those monies are going to those programs. And so that's the discussion I keep wanting to have, is about the budget and how we've been stripping these programs for too long, resulting in where we are today. So that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you.
And then we had a question from Angel. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, how's it going? Thank you everyone for hosting it, and thank you for participating in this forum. My name is Angel Montalvo. I am a lifelong resident of Miami-Dade, Florida. I've been involved with 350 in the past, and I'm currently running for a Democratic Executive Committee position in Miami-Dade County. So Melba, thank you again for participating. And I just had a question. One of the part of the response that you gave to Rachel's question was about elections. And I think it's really important that people participate in the electoral process. Now, I have a question with regards to the judiciary, and how, when I was doing research on candidates, yourself included, I found it really difficult to have a criteria by which to evaluate the judges, because at least from my understanding, there's an issue of partisanship and judges stating their position on issues. So I was wondering, given that you have a lot more experience with the judicial system than I do, what you would say to somebody who is trying to figure out which of the judges would be the best choice for them. I guess particularly because we don't know, especially for example, we're talking about the climate and racial justice and the intersection between those two. How can somebody make an informed decision for circuit judges and things like that, when we don't really have that much information available to us, as far as my research went, in terms of making these decisions? Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks for that question, Angel. And yeah, that's a tough one, because judges are forbidden, or judicial candidates as well as judges are forbidden by the rules of ethics from talking about how they would rule in a particular instance, or how they feel about certain types of crimes, because that's viewed as a conflict of interest and just problematic. So how I handle it is that, number one, I tend to give advice to folks if they ask me. And so if somebody messages me on Facebook, I'm happy to share my experiences with some of the judicial candidates or some of the actual sitting judges, based on, my time when I was a prosecutor, or working with them on community initiatives or things like that. So my advice would be to, if you have an attorney within your circle of friends, reach out to them. If not, check out the Daily Business Review. Is one of the, I guess, domestically, and I guess it's one of the key newspapers or blogs within the Miami-Dade legal system. And they have a guide that they put together. And it's not really, it just mostly kind of tells you the bios of each of the judges and maybe how long they've served, or, this person's a candidate and this is what their area of specialty was in the past. So you can read that just to get a sense of who the candidates are. But reach out to any attorneys you know, or reach out to the local bar associations and say, hey, do you have a guide or a recommended slate or something of candidates? Because sometimes, like for instance, I'm past president of the Gwen S. Cherry Black Women Lawyers Association. They're having a judicial forum coming up, and that might be a good opportunity to see the judges at least interact with each other so you can get a little bit of a sense of who they are. So reaching out to local bar associations to get their recommendations as well. But if anybody wants to inbox me on Facebook, I'm happy to give my experience and give my suggestions based on what I've observed.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Melba. All right. So I guess that should sort of wrap up our Q&A. Do you have any final comments or closing remarks?
Sure. So again, thank you so much for having me on this afternoon. Listen, we're 19 days away. We have the chance to make real history here in Miami-Dade County. My website is www.melbaformiami.com. Melba, F-O-R, Miami.com. If you have the bandwidth and you can do so, please donate, because we're in that last push to make sure that we're getting our messaging out there, buying radio ads, etc. Also, make sure to tell your friends, family, colleagues about the fact that, again, a real progressive is running for state attorney here in Miami-Dade County. So encourage everyone to vote. I am number 24 on the ballot, so definitely make sure to check me out. And then also, lastly, you can find me on all social media at Melba for Miami. Same thing, Melba, F-O-R, Miami. So again, thanks so much, and don't forget to vote August 18th.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Catherine, you wanted to say something?
Days away, and am I muted or not? She mentioned we're 19 days away from the election, and I've been hearing that people that are doing absentee voting should mail in their ballots 18 days ahead of time, just to prevent any sort of, well, your ballot didn't get enough time, it wasn't stamped with the right date. I mean, or there were so many and they couldn't count them all. So that's just a suggestion. Don't wait until August 15th or 16th to mail it in. Mail it in as soon as you can. That's all.
Thank you for that, Catherine, and thank you all for joining. Thank you, Eric, for hosting, and yeah, we hope to see you soon. And this will be in YouTube and Facebook, so you can help share with your friends and family to get to know Melba. And we look forward to seeing you soon with our next candidate forum, and have a great day. Thank you all.